welcome once again to those of you who have seen the channel before, and thank you for joining us for the first time ever for those of you who have not. I am Jared Johnson, the Jared J. Joining me today is a first-time guest to the show. He was a production assistant on seasons 3 and 4 of the show The Chosen, which we may talk about a little bit more as we go.
Stay tuned.
Please welcome me, and join me in welcoming to the channel, Christian Kraemer!
Well, that's the best intro I've ever done in my life. Can I just hire you? Can I hire you for like everywhere?
Every room you walk into, like, just make sure I go in a little bit first, and then everybody will know that you're there.
Yeah, I mean, what's your day rate? We'll talk after the show.
We could maybe work something out. There's something to be said on the impression you make upon entering a room.
Mm-hmm. But also it helps whenever somebody else does that introduction for you.
Kind of lays some groundwork, because you still got to enter the room.
Right, I've still got to enter the room.
I can announce you with all that fervor, then if you come in sheepishly, people are gonna go, man, what's wrong with this?
If you're hyping me up like that, there's no way I'm being sheepish. I'm in it. I'm feeling the room over there. The expectation is set, and I'm just going to go forward.
When the bar's up there, you don't come crawling in.
Right, exactly. Just going straight under the atmosphere.
Indubitably. Now, believe it or not, Christian Kraemer and I just met a couple weeks ago at an event we had at Cross Church in North Richland Hills, and we have a mutual friend, Ethan Snyder, who is a middle school minister at Cross Church, where I'm a member. So Ethan introduced us, and Ethan told me ahead of time, I really want you to meet my friend Christian. Y'all might be the two funniest people I've ever met. So even if everyone else disagrees, apparently Ethan's opinion is we might be the two funniest people he's ever met.
Which is the worst way you can introduce some people, because if I hear there's the second funniest person, at that point I'm just forced I have to kill you now. So that's like really not a good expectation to start with.
Or you think to yourself, there's somebody else that he thinks is as funny as I am?
Right.
How is that possible? But then he said we might be the two funniest, which by that logic we might not be. So there's many ways to really dissect that that statement. And Ethan, this past Wednesday night at church, he was telling his wife, Madeline, hello Madeline Snyder, he said, yeah, Jared's going to be doing a podcast with Christian. For some reason, when he said podcast with Christian, I thought he said Jared's going to be doing a podcast nutrition.
We're doing nutrition now?
It threw me off for a moment. Then I realized what he said. But then I thought, you know what? I could do a podcast with Christian and talk about nutrition. We could just amalgamate those ideas. So on that note, how do you feel about riboflavin?
Riboflavin? I don't know, but if we're doing a podcast nutrition, buy our supplements right here. Discount code, the Jared J. There you go.
Are we buying them from you?
I mean,
that's my discount code and buy some riboflavin.
I mean, I think we've got the promo here now, so now it's your job to find the right podcast supplement, and then we can just put it right here with the power of video editing. So if you get your sponsor, we've already got it ready to go.
You're going, okay. And if we can find a great riboflavin distributor that aligns with my values, maybe we'd really be honest.
Are any of you looking for riboflavin?
Yes,
Are any of you riboflavin sponsors? We've got this spot right here for you.
Please let me know
it's
in the comments.
pre-recorded.
Because we're ready to roll with the riboflavin if you've got some that you want to sell. It's a great idea. I like that. Now, on that note, do you remember what your reaction was the first time you tried a fruit roll-up?
First time I tried a fruit roll-up. That's a good question. Because when I was growing up, we didn't really have fruit roll-ups or a lot of sugar stuff. If you ever went to Sprouts, have you ever had those like fruit bar things that are just dried fruit?
Well, I'm familiar with their existence at least.
You're familiar with their existence?
Yes.
I mean, they don't taste like anything besides like, this is in a packaging thing. It probably could be unhealthy, but there's a fruit on the cover instead of a fun little character.
So that leads you to believe it might be good for you.
I mean, yeah. So
there's a picture of fruit on it.
Yeah, exactly. You think that, and then I mean, it's not bad. I mean, I enjoyed it.
But also, if that's the only kind of fruit-flavored thing you ever have, you might love it because you don't have anything else to compare it to.
Right, but then once you have the spectrum, and then once you try a fruit roll, you can't really go back after that. Like, you're not going to beat a fruit roll. Also, just how long it is, just the fun you get of just
unraveling it.
Yeah,
almost
unraveling
like a brand new roll of duct tape.
Right, and you just think it's done, and then there's just more and more roll-up to go. Like, it doesn't get much better than that.
Okay, that's one way to look at it. I actually remember the first time I tried a fruit roll-up, I was, I don't know, 5, 6 years old maybe. I had never had one, but I had had actual fruit, and most of it I thought tasted pretty good. Mm-hmm. So when I saw this thing called a fruit roll-up, like I thought, how can you beat that?
Right.
I took one bite and regurgitated all over the floor. I literally remember this, and I thought, well, that was disappointing. Because in my mind, I'm like, this is going to be amazing. I've had some fruit roll-ups since then. It took me at least a day to try another one. Mm-hmm. They're okay.
Did you throw up the second time?
No, only that first time.
So it's all uphill from there.
The initial reaction was so jarring. I guess it just didn't meet my expectations.
Your taste buds were not ready for the power of the fruit roll-up.
And they revolted.
Fruit roll-up, if you're looking for a sponsorship, the code's right here.
And and you can let us know in the comments about that.
You don't throw up anymore. They fixed that part.
No, one time, and then my body adapted
because of how awesome it was. Not a bad type of throw up. This was the good type.
I think it just shocked my system so much that I couldn't handle it at that moment.
Right.
But I've had them since then, and I've liked them, and so I don't know. I think it was just such a jolt to my system, and I don't know what my expectations were as a 5-year-old, but for whatever reason, my body violently rejected that first notion of a fruit roll-up. Now, when did you first become interested in filmmaking, and what was it that drew you to that?
That's a really good question. I would
a little bit different than the fruit roll-up question.
A little bit different, yeah. That's probably more my field of expertise. Fruit roll-ups, I actually am not the biggest in my knowledge base on fruit roll-ups. Film, I have a little bit more introduction over there. Unless fruit roll-ups are like a snack on a film set. That's generally not something I'm thinking about.
There's a very good possibility that they could be.
It's happened once or twice.
I'm sure it's been done.
I mean, you'd have to be a union show, and that'd have to be a really high-budget union show to have fruit roll-ups on your crafty section.
Probably so, because I've been on some sets where you have zero craft services. By the way, if you're a producer, don't do that to your cast or crew. But I have been on some projects where that has been the case. So what was it that first drew you to that?
I think it was really just really enjoying media, and then just feeling like a lot of the content I saw, especially newer content versus older content, didn't really reflect the values, I would say, from like what I personally believe, but also just from a basic storytelling level. Like if you want to watch a lot of good movies, you generally have to go back a ways before you really get to the good content that kind of really reflects some of the values of, I would say, morals and entertainment that I'd share.
Okay.
So it was kind of really a desire of like, why isn't there stuff like this? And that was a question I had for a while.
So what would you say, like what era of stuff are you saying that you'd have to go back to that's really good or does reflect values you're referring to?
I mean, I would say it's really the further back you go, but then...
Like 50s, 90s?
I mean, I would say like 80s to 2000s, maybe early 2010s.
So we're not even talking like the Charlie Chaplin era.
I mean,
some of that is really good, actually.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I love a good old film, but I felt like pretty much like once you get to that period, really like about the 2010 range, that's when at least mainstream entertainment isn't really the same as a lot of the other two. Because if you look at like the Best Picture winners up until even today, it's like, none of the big commercial movies are the ones that will win the award now. Now it's generally some indie. Like, you don't find something like Lord of the Rings in 2002 or 2001 when Return of the King swept all the Oscars because it was a great movie, but it was also great entertainment. And I feel like there's a lot of movies that really don't have that balance anymore. Now, you still find like a good movie once in a while. Like The Holdovers is a good recent example of a movie that would be more something I would like, or something more like Hacksaw Ridge, but I feel like it's more of a rarity now. So it was more... I really got in film was more just desire of like, why isn't this many films that are made like this the way I would like them? Okay. And then eventually I got to a point of just like, what would it look like to actually make content or like be in that world? So that's really where that desire started.
Maybe, and I'm speculating a little bit here, but was there a moment of why isn't there enough? And then, well, if it bothers me, why don't I do something about it?
Right.
Why don't I... Instead of waiting for someone else to create what I think there should be, why don't I work on creating it myself?
And it was like it was just a desire that was just on my heart for a while. And there was a while it was just kind of a passing thought of like, like I want to make movies, but also I'm in Dallas, Texas. Like, what sort of stuff is going on in Dallas, Texas? So it was just really kind of just a general question I had. And then I went to school with this friend of mine one day that said they were like casting a movie with Kevin Sorbo that was filming in Texas, and I was like, wait, you can like film movies in Texas? Which is, now that I've done film for a while, it's crazy that I thought that. But
you can literally do it anywhere, but everyone doesn't necessarily realize that.
Right, like I thought you'd have to move out to LA or Hollywood. So it was really, that was kind of the first time my gears turned of like, but can you do stuff here in Texas? And then that was pretty much, I would say, the catalyst of that. And then it kind of just, one thing led to another from there. And it was just like, well, if that person can do it, then why can't I do it? And then
clearly
it was just,
it can be done.
That's what it's seeming like. I've been doing it full time for about 3 years now, so I would hope it can be done.
Well, if you have been doing it, then I would say, much like when I saw you walking towards the house today, walking can be done because you did do it.
I can confirm I did walk to the house.
Yes.
I also drove as well.
I didn't see you drive, but I assumed you didn't walk all the way.
I didn't have a fruit roll
unless you lived down the street and I just didn't know it.
Yeah, you live with neighbors all this time?
I was not aware of this. We learn things as
so
we
that's
go
why
along.
you never visited my house. That makes sense.
That's a large part of it. Yes, that is very true. Also, I didn't know if you were going to offer me fruit roll-ups or not. Mm-hmm. And if you did, I wasn't sure how I felt about that.
Well, yeah, I didn't know your feelings.
Because you didn't know that my body had revolted so violently against
I still don't know if you like or dislike fruit roll-ups at this point. Because you threw up and then you didn't.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you would like it or you just kind of be like, it's fine.
I think I could handle them okay at this point and be fine.
But would you enjoy it?
Not as much as a double whopper.
Yeah, so if I'm going to get you something, it's going to be a double whopper, or a can of Dr. Pepper.
Oh, you already know that I'm going to prefer Dr. Pepper.
Right, so...
at almost any point in life. So what drew you to filmmaking, you would say, was just kind of not seeing enough of what you even enjoyed.
Yeah, it was just kind of just a desire that kind of, it just started as a spark, and then it just kind of just grew from there of just like, why isn't it this stuff? And then start to research, then you'd like watch a lot of like older movies, then you just are going to be like, I just really love this type of content. Like, why don't we have more of this? And then it was starting to kind of go from the basics and like, what would it look like to actually make a film or make a movie? And then you realize that costs a lot of money and you need a lot of favors. So then it's kind of like, so what would kind of just some actionable steps be? So at one point I just, decided just like how hard it would be to try to, just work on a film set here or there. And it was kind of like, one thing led to another, and eventually I stumbled my way onto one set. And then if you want to get onto film, the main thing you can do is just work hard and have a good attitude, and just one opportunity led to another and another and another. And then sooner or later, before I knew it, it was really all I was doing was just working in film.
And a couple things I would say. Number one, yes, there's this perception, and probably still a large percentage of the business is done in the Los Angeles area. Mm-hmm. But one realization I came to was, you can literally direct movies anywhere.
Right.
Like, I could direct, in fact, I did direct a feature film that was all inside of one house. I did that in Euless, Texas, which is here in the Dallas area. Mm-hmm. You could literally shoot, contingent upon what type of stuff you want to shoot. Some things you may have to go to certain countries or locations, whatever. Contingent upon the story you want to tell, you could shoot a movie in any city on the planet.
Right.
Literally, like the one I did that was all in one house. You could do a story about people in one house, never show any footage outside of that house.
Right.
It could be in the smallest city on the entire globe, and you could still produce it there. So I think for a lot of people who may have that, for people listening, it may be like, oh, but I'd like to, but I can't. Mm-hmm. It can be done anywhere. Are there more resources in certain places? Yes. Do you need to know what you're doing? 100%. Do you need to have connections with people that can help you get to where you need to be? Indubitably. But the physical location's not as crucial as some people may think. And then I'll say this too, talking about you not seeing enough of the content that you like. I have long theorized that anything that's written well enough can be good. You could literally do a movie about two people sitting at a table talking. Mm-hmm. If the characters are kind of like we're doing right now. If the characters are interesting enough and the dialogue is interesting enough, I'll sit and watch that.
Hopefully the characters in this one are interesting enough, or we have a problem.
They're deciding, I guess, as we...
if you're watching, we did something. Otherwise, you clicked off. And
then, but hopefully some of you are still with us. But
I would like to
yeah.
backtrack on your original comment about filming just anywhere with any location.
Okay.
It is important if you do have a film you want to make and there's something there, it is important to know what limitations you have. For example, my first short film I did, it was called Don't Fly Away, it was a meet cute with kites. I went with that one specifically in mind with like, I want to make a short film and I want to make it short and as few locations as possible. So I knew there was like just a park like 10 minutes from my house and I'm like, this thing is gonna be so easy, I can't mess it up. So then, it's like a nice little park, but also it's Texas. It was beginning of spring, blue bonnets and Indian paintbrushes are like everywhere. So just this location was beautiful. And to me, it was just a normal park. But if you put that on camera and you capture it, then that's a specific moment. Then other people that might not know that specific location would work better to it. So, if you have a project you want to make, if you can't have that idea for your the next Star Wars idea, that's this huge, big budget sci-fi, but that's going to be hard to be done right. But if you have a story that's got strong characters and a good script, really everything else comes secondary. So if you have a desire to make films, it is great to have that desire for, either that space epic or, historical fiction or, whatever project you want to do. But it is important also to scale back and be like, doing something like that is going to be really complicated, especially if you want to do a feature film. I'm sure, Jared, you can attest it, but there's a big difference between doing a feature film and doing a short film.
There's a massive difference between the two.
I haven't even attempted a feature film yet. I'm hoping to finish writing my first feature film by the end of the year, but at least right now, I've been more just working on shorts and just trying different genres and experimenting with different stuff, because the only way you can learn how to get better at the craft you want to do is to try and fail at it and to just fail continuously over and over and over again, because eventually you're going to get better. Because, if your parents tell you, don't touch the stove, it's hot, and you don't believe them, I mean...
You'll find out by touching it.
Yeah, if you touch it, you'll never make that mistake again. So I can say, even from the 3 short films I've done, there's so many things I've done where I've just failed so spectacularly, but then you do the next one and it's like, well, I'm not going to fail with that specific situation.
Yeah, I would add to that, as long as you're learning as you go... Failure in and of itself is just failure, but we can learn a tremendous amount from our failures.
And I really think that's the best, and really the only way to learn, because if you know why you failed, you're never going to make that same mistake again. So, but yeah, just whenever you're making your film, think of just the fact of like, what are some locations you have? Maybe your work or something like that is like, we're closed on Sundays.
To you?
Yeah, we're closed on Sundays, or maybe you have you can't find any actors, but you've got a buddy of yours with a really cool masculine mustache. You're like, maybe we could do something with him. Let's use that guy.
Get a close up of that mustache and we'll do something.
Right, but just knowing that archetype. So what resources do you have? And work within those resources, because if you try to make something with resources you don't have, it's not going to work as well. Like if you want to make some experimental coming of life dramas with an old guy and you've got your buddy in college and you put old prosthetic makeup on him, it's not going to look good and it's not going to work. So what are the tools you have? What are the locations you have? Do you have a cool prop, or what's something you have that makes you unique and makes your project unique? Because you do have some desires and you have some talents and there's some stuff that appeals to you that we haven't seen yet. So if you have something that's unique to you, film that, work with that. And if you don't hit the mark with it, go on, try it again, because all you can do is just learn, what didn't I do right? Now I'm going to do this again, and how can I make this even better than I did last time?
I think that's excellent advice, and I would add to that, or to summarize that and then add to it, instead of worrying about what you don't have, focus on what you do have.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's going to be the best way to make the best project. And I would say too, in my opinion, you mentioned like the Lord of the Rings, and nothing against those, but I think I told you that I prefer, not only from a standpoint of watching, but also as a writer-director, I like movies like realistic stories about everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things that appeal more to me, but I will on occasion watch, I've seen all the Star Wars movies. I grew up watching those. I've seen a lot of the Marvel movies. I don't watch them all anymore, but I've saw them all up to Endgame and a couple of beyond that. I've seen a lot of the Batman movies. I've seen the first Lord of the Rings. I've seen a lot of that type of stuff. But I would say massive budgets, multiple locations, computer generation, huge choreographed fight scenes, the biggest name stars on the planet. In my opinion, those are not the things that make a great film. There are some great films that have those things in them. Mm-hmm. But if it's not a well thought out story that's really well written, with really good dialogue, with very realistic performances, and really good direction that pieces everything together, you just got a really, all you have outside of those elements are just a really expensive movie that no one's going to care about watching.
Right.
Like the core, though, my opinion, the core's got to be, it starts with having an idea and a really great script, and then being in the hands of the right director, casting everybody, and then if you have a budget and a vision to do an Avengers Endgame, which in my opinion is a good example. For the most part, I thought that was a pretty darn good movie. It had those bigger budget elements, but you also had a story about all these characters from different other movies that had to come together to try to defeat this enemy that none of them could beat on their own, and actually Captain Marvel, I think, could have killed him by herself. Story for another day.
Right.
But
well, that's what she's taken out immediately in that movie.
Yeah, they kind of took her out of the equation, but trying to face this enemy that none of them had an answer for. So you had, at the core, a very good story that was very well written, very good performances from people that really fit their characters that they were playing. So even a movie that had all the big budget and all those other elements, I will surmise that's not what made it great. What made it great were the other elements I spoke about, and you can have those elements in a movie that costs almost nothing to make.
Right.
Without the movie stars, without the money, you can still have a very good story, a very good script that's well crafted with realistic performances, and still have a really good film, in my opinion.
I would like to go back with your topic with Endgame, because even using that as an example, the reason the directors at the Russo brothers got that opportunity was, they didn't start out and just, they had Endgame. Where they really started out was they actually directed TV sitcoms. So if any of you guys have watched Arrested Development or Community, that's where the Russo brothers got their start. It's Russo or Russo. I always get their names
whoever
pronounced.
They are.
Well, those people, they just, top 10 top grossing directors of all time.
Yeah,
but they started with Arrested Development and Community, which are large ensemble pieces. And they worked from that. And I don't know, if you guys haven't watched Community, it's the funniest show ever made. Stop what you're doing, watch that. By the time you get to episode 3, you'll be hooked. That's my hot take of the thing. Community is the best show ever made.
Interesting.
But the Russo brothers, the reason they got their opportunity to direct The Winter Soldier, which was their first Marvel movie, was in Community they had these episodes called the paintball episodes, which it was still a sitcom, but they situated it more like an action movie. And that proved to Marvel that these guys could direct a large ensemble where you could still care about the action, still care about the characters, and they did that really well. So even though they hadn't directed a big budget feature film, they were able to do excellence, which is doing the best you can with the time and the resources you're given. So they had a sitcom and they were able to make it really compelling drama. So they
sprung board from an episode of Community, or multiple episodes really, but of Community, to now directing one of the highest grossing films of all time.
Yeah,
but again, that started with, they went Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame, all built up to that.
It's like the parable of the man with the talents, to whom much is given, much, or do
you invest or do you bury your
right
talents?
If you actually, if you have talents and you use them well, you get more responsibility. You did that well, let's try something else. So they started with Arrested Development, then Community, and it was like, all right, let's give you The Winter Soldier, which was Captain America and was set in the modern day, and that was a more tight movie. And that's, love or hate Marvel, like that's one of their best for sure. And then from there they're like, all right, these guys are good. So then they did Captain America Civil War, which is pretty much almost Avengers 2.5. And then from there,
basically is Avengers 3, without the Hulk and Thor, but it's basically
right. So then it's just from there they started with literally a sitcom that's a comedy sitcom at a community college. But because they were able to do excellence even with that, with no resources, that also prepared them whenever they did have something where the stakes are high and you do have the big budgets and everything to be ready for that. Because I know if Jared was like, I've got $200 million, you're going to make the movie you want, would I take that opportunity? 100%. And I would probably fail it spectacularly, but I would still try it. So it is important to learn while you still have the time, while the spotlight isn't on you. I think Quarter Crew said it best, or like you have 40 bad videos in you, so you just need to get through those bad ones.
Go and get those out of the way as you're going along.
Even just in I've directed 3 short films now, but I would say there's been, at least for me personally, seeing from the first shot to the last shot, from the first one to the last one, I would say there's been exponential growth just from the 3 I've done. I've learned so much from there. And it took me really 2 years even being in the industry before I made my first short film, because I put so much pressure on, like, well, I have to make this be the best thing it's got to be. It's got to be perfect. I have, this level of perfection that is impossible to achieve because you'll never have it perfect. But then after I did the first one, then it started to be more like, okay, well, I've done that. And then I finished it. And I was like, all right, this is what worked. This is what didn't work. So then, you do it again. You're a little bit smarter because you know what to do. You have a good group of collaborators there, and it's not your first time in the ring. Now it's your second time.
Right. Now it's your second time. So you're twice as comfortable, hopefully.
Right. Yeah, now you know what to do. Just a little bit more.
Right. I remember doing, and I've done a lot of short films and some feature films as well as an actor, and then also some as a writer, director, producer. The feature film I did, and then I'll bounce back to what I was going to say, is a 90-minute film that's all in one house that I wrote, directed, produced, and played not only the main character but the only character. So it's literally a 90-minute one-man show of just me in the house. And I just decided, kind of like you're saying, I was like, I can do this. I'm just gonna make a feature film.
It's a realistic expectation.
And I just had to come up with a story. Then I wrote a character that you have to be crazy to play, and I knew I could play it. And then I just rolled with it.
He likes Dr. Pepper. He's crazy.
Oh, that was the least of what was crazy about that movie, believe me. But I did one short film. I've done several, but one of the ones I'm thinking of, I worked with a guy that it was his first time directing, and he was 17 years old. Now, the movie, like it or don't like it, is everybody's opinion. When we had the premiere, we actually were at a theater in Denton, and the young man who directed it, he was really nervous beforehand because he really wanted everybody to like it. And I could tell he was like kind of anxious about it. And so we were talking later, and he asked me what I thought. And before I even gave him my opinion, I said, well, what did you think about it? And the first thing he said was, well, I don't know. I hope people liked it. I said, that's not what I'm asking you. What did you think? This was your original idea. You directed it. Did you get what you wanted? Don't worry about, I can tell you what I think, but don't worry about that. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks. That's a whole different category. This was your project. What did you think? Did you get what you wanted to do? Did you achieve what you wanted to achieve? If the answer is yes, then why does it matter if anybody else liked it? And I said, I get it. Everybody wants everybody to like what they do. I'm not trying to beat you down for it, but I don't want you to fixate so much on that you gauge your success or failure based on what everybody else thinks. Did you accomplish what you wanted to accomplish? Did you have fun doing it? Are you proud of it? Did you learn along the way? If the answers are yes, then you succeeded. Who cares what me or anybody else thought? And then I told him my opinion, but I was like, number one,
right.
you need to know that you succeeded based on, did you accomplish what you wanted to accomplish? If your goal was to have a movie theater full of people loving it, then your success is always going to be gauged on what somebody else thought. That shouldn't be your goal. Your goal should be to tell the story you want to tell in the way that you want to tell it. And then I told him too, I said, man, you're 17 years old and you actually directed a short film. Do you know how many people on this planet spend their lives saying, I'd like to direct movies, and they never do it? You've accomplished something right now that most people in the world never do because they're too afraid or too preoccupied to actually try it. So regardless of how many people loved it or didn't, you accomplished something at age 17 that nobody can ever take away from you for the rest of your life. And after I put all that, he was like, man, yeah, you're right, thanks. Like, that made him feel, but he was so
And then he
anxious.
roasted his film for the next 20 minutes and he cried out of there.
Tore
it was
apart
great.
like you wouldn't believe. I'm kidding, of course. But my point to him was, who cares if the whole room hated it? Like, I know you're going to care, but did you get what you wanted from it? If the answer is yes, then you succeeded. And I genuinely believe that. And I get it too. Anything you do, if I direct it, I don't want people to hate it. But you can disagree with what I did, and I'm going to have my reasons. Well, here's why I did it this way. And if I got what I wanted to get, that's okay if everybody else doesn't love it. I decided early on, everything I do is not going to be something that everybody loves. I'm not going to worry about trying to please everybody or worrying about, I want, everybody, a huge fan following, or, that movie was successful, so let me make one just like it. I'm going to tell the stories I want to tell. I'm going to do what I believe God's inspiring me to do. And that's going to be success. Did I accomplish what I wanted to do? Am I walking the path God has called me to walk? Am I telling the stories that I believe He's calling me to tell? If the answers are yes, then that's okay. That's success. Do we all want people to love what we do? Yeah, but I want it to impact people's lives more. Mm-hmm. If some people don't like it, but it impacts somebody else's life on a deep level, I've succeeded. Praise God. And so, those are the kind of things that I feel like so many of us get our focus in the wrong areas, in my opinion. If you're not doing it because you love it, first of all, filmmaking's way too hard. If you don't love it, you're not ever going to succeed anyway, because it's way too much work to put yourself through for something you don't genuinely love doing. So if you don't, my opinion too, if you don't genuinely love it, you're not ever going to succeed, because there's going to be way too many times where you just think it's too hard and you don't feel like continuing to do it. So if the love's not there, you're not gonna.
If you're doing it for fame or doing it for money, then you're not gonna have a good time.
You're not gonna make it that far.
But if you're doing it because you just have a burning desire in your heart that you want to tell stories for whatever reason it is that motivates you to go forward, that's what's gonna have you push through the long nights, the sleepless hours. Just doing everything you can just to make the best piece of art you can. I'd say for my first short film, I probably spent over 1,000 hours working on that. And that was
on one project. It wasn't even a feature. Let that sink into everybody. 1,000 hours roughly.
Right. Part of that is probably just me being too much of a perfectionist and just it has to be perfect. And then you get to it, and then it's it's good. You send it to people. But I personally am very happy with how that project ended up. So some other people might say that was a crazy use of my time, but for me that was I'm happy with it.
Was it? I don't. If you, I can go back to what I said a while ago. Did you accomplish something? Right. Did you learn from it? Did it make you better?
Right. I'm extremely happy with how it turned out. It's called Don't Fly Away. You can look it up on IMDb.
Don't Fly Away. So that's a little bit different than I'll Fly Away, the hymn.
It was
not quite the same thing.
It's about kites, so I would probably make it a little bit different.
Yeah, so not quite the same. Now, did you have a favorite movie? So yes or no, did you have a favorite movie as a child?
Oh, growing up, that's a good one. I would say growing up, Ratatouille, The Incredibles were probably my favorite when I could only watch PG movies.
Okay.
And then as I got older, I remember when I first saw Lord of the Rings for the first time. That was the first PG-13 movie I ever watched.
Okay.
And so that I remember just
partial victory, just that I'm watching a PG-13
right. That was part.
I didn't care how good it is.
I didn't even care how good it was. And then the bar, at least for me, it just blew my mind. It was just every single moment. I don't want to spoil it, but if you haven't seen Lord of the Rings, what are you even doing right now?
I was about to say, if you wanted to see it and you haven't yet, my goodness, you've had more than 20 years.
Yeah,
do so.
But it's just perfect on every level, and it just set the bar so high, and then you watch everything else, and nothing else, in my opinion, really comes close to that, at least in terms of grand spectacle filmmaking. But then recently, as I've gotten older and my tastes have differed a little bit, I would say It's a Wonderful Life is really the movie that keeps coming back to me. It was the first black and white movie, and I remember when I first watched it with my family, it was kind of just it's interesting, but I was 10. I didn't really understand the themes with it.
You have to get older and really let it.
But then it's it'd play every year at my family's house, so it just sooner went from kind of just having the background and just playing with my siblings or whatever, and then eventually it just got to a point where I just watched it again and again and again, and then just the best movies they revisit you over life. I believe Martin Scorsese is the one that says it. So it was every year, it was a different period that would just hit me and convict me, and eventually just got to a point where I'm just there isn't really a better movie than that, in my opinion. So my production company is actually a homage to It's a Wonderful Life, and it's called Last of the Moon Productions, and specifically because of that movie. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I like that. It's a pretty cool story. It's a Wonderful Life, I do appreciate now. When I was growing up, I got so sick of hearing about it because my mom believes we have to watch it every Christmas. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's the best Christmas movie. And she almost made it a requirement. So my sister and I were like, no, we don't care. Mm-hmm. We didn't kind of get to discover it on our own. It was almost like an assignment. We're going to sit down and watch it now. Right. So I just didn't care. But as I've become an adult, I've watched it, like you said, and you're kind of in a different place in your life. Then I started realizing this actually is a really good movie. It's a really good story.
You can't be forced to enjoy it
now. But yeah, over the years, I would tune out because I was like, Mom, I don't care. Mm-hmm. I know you love this movie. I don't care to watch it every year. But now I will watch it every year because I actually do like it. And you mentioned The Incredibles and Ratatouille, which I'm sure you know were written and directed by the same guy, Brad Bird. When he won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature for Ratatouille, or it might have been Best Original Screenplay, he was giving a speech for one of those. Mm-hmm. He said something that I absolutely loved. He was giving a speech and he said, when I was in high school, my guidance counselor asked me, well, what do you want to do for a living? And I said, I want to make movies. And they were like, well, Brad, let's pick something a little more realistic. What do you want to do? No, I want to make movies. Okay, well, let's come up with an alternate plan. They kept trying to be like, that's not the most practical thing. And he kept telling them, no, what I want to do is make movies. And his guidance counselor finally said, okay, Brad, let's imagine that we live in a world where movies do not exist. Then what would you want to do? And Brad Bird said, I thought about it for several seconds, and then I said, I would want to invent movies. And he said, that's why I'm standing here today. There was no other option. I did not consider maybe I'll become a banker. No offense to bankers anywhere. But
I have one offense to bankers, actually.
Okay, so offense from Christian Kraemer to bankers everywhere from every branch. But
my credit score is going to be ruined after this.
They're all coming after you now. Look out.
Oh, no.
But yeah, that's how bad Brad Bird wanted to make movies. He's like, that's why I've succeeded. There was no other alternative. I didn't consider, if this doesn't work, then what? This is what I was going to do. And so when I heard that, I was like, that's pretty awesome. That's a guy that's just doing what he loves. Not a guy who's like, oh, I hope the rest of the world loves it. Clearly, a lot of people did because he's up there giving a speech at the Academy Awards.
Right, he did something.
But he got there because this is what I want to do. I just want to make movies. Mm-hmm. Now, do you personally prefer using an electric pencil sharpener or one with a crank handle?
I actually just recently got a pencil sharpener when I visited Shiloh. That's a Canon that has a pencil sharpener under it, so that's going to be my guess with that.
So it's a Canon.
It's a Canon, and then like right under not the barrel, but under the barrel, there's a pencil sharpener. So I can have a Canon.
Is it an electric pencil sharpener?
It's a manual one.
Oh, so there's a crank handle.
No, it's just those ones you like put in and then you just twist it.
Oh, so you twist the pencil.
But itself. Also you can like hold the candle.
So your answer is a little bit different. It didn't have a crank, but it's not electric.
Right.
Okay, so Canon style that you twist the pencil yourself.
And then also you just get a Canon on your desk, so you can just...
It's cool to just have a Canon on your desk.
Right, and then like, why do you have a Canon on your desk? And you're like, it's my pencil sharpener. What are you talking about?
It's like, what do you mean, why do I have a Canon? Why don't you have one?
Yeah, you don't have a Canon?
And do you have a sharpened pencil? Because I do.
Yeah.
And here's how I got it.
You want a sharpened pencil? I got you.
Any other ignorant questions while you're here? Go out and give me some fruit roll-ups and bring me back a double whopper. That's how you handle... that situation.
And now you've asserted dominance. Now you've won that conversation.
And now they walk away going, I should have had a Canon. Why did I ask about having a Canon? Now, do you know right at this very moment, without doing any research, do you know right at this very moment what the barometric pressure in Denver, Colorado is?
I have no idea.
Me neither.
Oh, well, good question.
And on a somewhat different note, tell us about when you accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior. About how old were you? Did someone help lead you to God? Tell us a little bit about that time of your life.
I mean, I would say, I've been of the faith pretty much like for as long as I can remember. I mean, my name is Christian, and on top of that, my middle name is Lewis, which is after C.S. Lewis because my parents were
Clive Staples Lewis.
This man got it.
Boom.
There's your thumbnail, by the way.
Yeah, there you go.
So I would say, from the time I've grown up, it's really always been a constant in my life of Christianity. So I can't point to a specific moment where I remember before Christ and after Christ, but I can definitely feel the gradual change in my life as I've gotten older and I've learned to develop and make my faith more my own. I would say it was probably around first grade was when I really just kind of started, second grade, when I really started to get curious about my faith, and that was when I would ask a lot of questions to the spiritual leaders in my life, which for me was really my dad and my grandpa, and I would hound them for hours over just the dumbest, most minute questions I could think of, but I was always inquisitive.
Can God create crickets?
Right, exactly. Can God create a rock that's too big for him to lift? All those.
Yeah, because no one's ever asked us that one. Yeah.
Right, it's a conundrum for sure. So I would say it was really that portion of it really had the knowledge part down. So I don't think I've ever really had a huge crisis of faith moment. I was never someone that like got into drugs when I was 12 and joined a gang and then like killed a man and then like came back to Christ around at the end. But it's been, I mean, I've had a pretty...
That could be a pretty good song, but anyway.
I mean, yeah, well, we can write that song.
We can work on that, actually.
Yeah,
we may have a new project.
Well, yeah, so that'll be our intro, so you'll see it by the end of there. We'll skip to this time code to get there. But going from that process, it was really just kind of gradually, just learning more, asking good questions, reading good books from like C.S. Lewis, like if you've read Mere Christianity or Screw Tape Letters or even Chronicles of Narnia, just for your own personal enjoyment, which still is a good backdrop there. That's just a really good process to have. And I would say really this last year, I've really had the knowledge portion down really well. But, the other portion of that makes our faith different from other faiths is the relationship aspect of it, which is a thing that I've really, I've spent so much of my time really on the knowledge and the works part, but it's different whenever it's a daily relationship. For example, when I was on The Chosen, it was like I spent all this time, working on the show for God, but I would say, I don't really feel like I prayed a lot during that time. But it was just, the work was just like, well, I'm doing this for God. But what was my intention for that? Because
what is my own personal walk like?
Right. I mean, I was doing it because, I want to do this for God, but also, God doesn't need you. If he wants to, the rocks will cry out. So it's really been this year has kind of really been more getting it to, what's my intention with why I'm doing film, why I'm making this content. And it's not because I want to do all this for God, but really it's just because I want to be the best person I can be and the best Christian I can be, and I want to honor God with everything I do. And it was kind of really once I did that and just kind of really had put me as second is really when I've really had a lot more of the opportunities that it was really the stuff that I've been pursuing the past year or so.
And you bring up some good points because you talked about doing things for God. It is possible for someone to never accept Christ as their Savior, but do a lot of good things. You can hold doors open for people. You can donate to this charity or that charity. You can stop and change a tire for somebody on the side of the freeway. Those are all great things. But what's missing in terms of our eternity is salvation, is that relationship with Christ. So, you can do good things, I guess, but are you doing them for what reason? That's kind of, I think, something that gets missing on a lot of people. It's like, but I did all these things. I'm a pretty good person, aren't I? Well, none of us are really good people because we're still all sinful creatures in our nature. It's that relationship with Christ that, like you said, separates us from any other religion.
Right. It's not just rituals that you do every day of, you pray every day at this time.
It's not about religion, it's about a relationship.
Right.
Yeah, that is what separates us. Now, you talked about some of your reasons for what drew you to filmmaking initially. I mentioned in the intro you worked as a production assistant on seasons 3 and 4 of The Chosen. Very quickly, if you have not seen it, go check it out. My opinion, it is a really well done show. I really do love it. I could watch episodes of it every day and never get tired. How did you become involved? So you came along in season 3. How much of the first 2 seasons had you seen, and how did you become involved with The Chosen?
That's a good question. I actually was involved with The Chosen, at least knew of The Chosen from the beginning because my family uses VidAngel, the service that it had originally streamed on. So I remember when they had the pilot out and they were doing funding for it, and I remember asking my parents, I saw the pilot, which was The Shepherd, and I loved it, and I just asked them, guys, we have to donate. This is so good. I can't wait for it to happen. And my dad's like, Christian, we're broke. We can't donate to this, and most Christian media is...
with what?
Yeah, and then most Christian media sucks anyway. So I remember when the first season came out, it was just the first 4 episodes, and just watched all of it, and it was that was back when they had the pay it forward and everything.
Yes,
and you had to do a specific time period you watched, and I just remember watching it just being that was just really good. That's different than all the rest of the stuff I've seen. And so when I watched season 1, I wouldn't even say I really had a strong desire to make movies at that point. That was kind of more just a back thought. And it was just this is just a really good show. Would never cross my mind that I would someday work on it. Season 2 was a little bit later in my life. That's more just this is just really cool. And then I actually learned that they filmed the show in Dallas, Texas. So when I got...
Are they doing the shooting in Dallas, or is it outside? Because I know Capernaum Studios is over an hour from from like Dallas.
Yeah, the Capernaum Studios is in a town called Poolsville. It's about 30 minutes west of Weatherford.
Yeah.
And so they filmed up to season 3. They did portions of that over there. But now they have their own studio in Midlothian, Texas, which is about 30 minutes south of Dallas.
Okay.
So they split their time between the Midlothian set, and then they also do a large portion in Utah.
Right.
Which is where pretty much everything you see that's in Jerusalem, or if there's a lot of mountains or anything like that, that would be in the Utah portion of it.
Okay.
But they split their shoot between Texas and Utah. So the way I got involved with the show was like when I was really taking film seriously, I really had one goal, and it was like to get on The Chosen, because I knew it was a show that was filmed locally over here, and it was also a good show and just something cool to be a part of. So that was really my main motivation. Like, I prayed for that goal every day, and I really pursued it. And at one point, I just saw someone's email or something like that. It was like, what was The Chosen email? So like, send my application. I had like no credits or anything to my name. It was just kind of just like, well, here you go, God. Here you go. And
I'm throwing my paper airplane, see if the wind takes it.
Yeah, there you go. And I applied, and somebody reached out to me, and we had like a back and forth, and then they just didn't respond. And I was just like, what am I supposed to do here? So like, I reapplied to them, and they didn't reply.
At that point, did you think, well, there that went?
No, I would say, especially if you're trying to make something in the arts, like, you really can't take no for an answer. And it's like, if this doesn't work, how can I do this? How can I do this? Not going to do this? Because it's like, for me, that was my goal. So like, I reached out to them again and no response, and I like found their social media, and I messaged them, and they didn't respond. And eventually just got to a point where I just felt like, well, God, if you wanted me to be here, like, this is what I feel like is the desire you have for me. So then I got to a point where I was just like, well, God, if you want me to be here, like, I'll submit my resume again. But, if it's not your will, then, like, I'll drop it.
I guess I'll move on.
So I sent my resume again, and then the next day, a person named Mitch Hudson reached out to me and was like, hey, my name's Mitch Hudson with The Chosen. Like, what's your availability like this week? So it was interesting for me, at least, because it got to the point where it finally wasn't, this is what I have to do. But it's like, well, God, I have this desire, and this is what, if you want me to do this, there you go again. And if you don't, oh well. And now, that person that reached out to me, his name's Mitch Hudson. He's the best bald person you'll ever meet in your life. He also, but like, good friends with him. And I've met a lot of other really good people in The Chosen, like Willie Molina, Adam Drake, like all these other really great people that have worked in the show. And if you haven't watched The Promised Land, the first episode, it's pilot, it's free on YouTube. They've got season 1 already filmed. If you haven't watched that, it's great. It's a mockumentary about Moses and the people of Israel. Imagine The Chosen meets The Office. It's really solid.
It's a mockumentary about...
It's The Office style. It's still respectful to the faith. And
I was like... That sounds...
Mockumentary is the style you call where it's supposed to be like a...
But
no, it's not.
Okay,
no, it's faithful to the
level of comedy of The Office, but it's shot that style.
Right.
Okay, that makes a little more sense, because I have not seen The Promised Land, so it's kind of like...
No, it's really good. And they've already got season 1 filmed, and so I'm excited for that to happen. But there's been a lot of lessons I feel like I've learned just even in the process of just going through my life while still trying to work in this industry, and then also still trying to hold the values I have. But there's been a lot of really good people I've met along the way that I'm honored to call brothers.
So being on the set on The Chosen, would you say, I don't want to say this, so it's obviously it's Christian content.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally about the story of Jesus while he was on earth. How much did you feel, I guess just to be real blunt, how much could you feel like the presence of the Holy Spirit? Like, how much did you feel like we're really making something to honor God versus like it's just a job? Does that make sense? Like, did you feel, from your experience, a distinct difference?
I would say I wouldn't necessarily say specifically the Holy Spirit, but I would say, you read the what you would call the sides for the day, which is the episode that you're just filming, you read that and you'd be like, oh, that's really good. Like, I'm like excited to film this. And also being a fan of the show, like, it's crazy. Like, I just remember the first time I remember seeing Jonathan in person, I was just like, oh my gosh, that's Jesus. And he's like, well, it's Jonathan, but backtrack with that. So I would say, I don't know if I've specifically felt the Holy Spirit on any particular project, but I would say the love and the camaraderie with the cast and crew, I would say, is different than I've experienced really in any other show. Okay. And I would say it's almost kind of ruined other shows for me, not because of anything specifically, but just the group of people and the love and that environment that's there. It's just been really good and really nurturing. And then when I work on other sets, I try to bring as much of that joy and levity that we have in The Chosen that we have in other shows that I've worked on.
Okay. I think that speaks a lot to the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people.
Mm-hmm.
I say that all the time. Anywhere I've ever worked, including film sets, but even at regular jobs, I always say, I want us to have as much fun as we can possibly have, as long as it doesn't interfere with getting the work done.
100%. If you're not having fun, what are you doing?
Yeah.
We're making movies. If you're not having fun making movies,
you can't have fun making movies. You really got to examine
And then
yourself.
really that all comes from the top down. So like, Dallas Jenkins is a great leader.
Who's that? I'm kidding, of course.
Yeah, if you don't know who Dallas Jenkins is.
Hello, Dallas Jenkins.
Yeah, a long-time watcher. Thank you, Dallas. But I mean, it just comes from the top down of like Dallas Jenkins is the director, and then Adam Drake is the first AD. He's the person that's in charge of the team I would work on, which is the assistant director team, where I'm a production assistant. So that comes from Adam Drake, who's the first AD, and Mitch Hudson, who's the second, and then really all the way down to like the team we had over there with Gwen as our key set, and Savannah and Rebecca and Danny and Lance and everybody that was on the team, and Ben Stockton, of course, who was my dog in season 4. Just that whole team over there was just, you could tell just the heart they had. And everybody that wanted to be in.
It makes a big difference when you care about each other and you want to be your best.
Oh, and Roby. I can't forget about Roby.
You.
Right.
Who?
And Roby. I just really.
Oh, Roby.
Otherwise, he's going to text me and I'm like, why did you?
Really? Like, I wasn't there?
He's second AD. He's in the office.
Yeah.
He's too busy and pouring for other stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you have a good team, that's really all that matters. And then, even if you're not having the best show you're making, if there's that good camaraderie over there, that's the stuff where you can work on other projects and you can really just enjoy the time. And I really think you make better art and better content. Your life's better that way, because I mean, if you're on a film set, it's 12 hours is the standard amount of time that you're going to spend on a set. It's 12 hours, and then it can be a little less, but it's generally over.
You better count on a 12-hour day.
If it's a union show, it's going to be a 12-hour day. You're probably going to go over the majority of the time, depending on what the shoot is. So if I'm not having fun with the people that I'm working with, it's like, what's really the point of the shoot?
Right, and back to what you said earlier too, if you can't have fun making movies, you have to ask yourself, would I rather be sitting in an office somewhere doing something I don't care about?
You're going to be working either way.
Would I rather be doing this?
It's just a lot more work, and then film is also freelance, so there's other variables to it. So if you're not enjoying what you're doing, why are you doing it?
What are you doing? Yeah. I will say there's a lot of things I like about The Chosen. I think it is very, very well done. I like a lot of the way that Jonathan Rumi, is that how you pronounce it, Rumi?
Yeah.
I like the way the humanity he brings to Jesus, because obviously there's got to be this reverence, but I like the way he playfully interacts with his disciples, the way he jokes with them. And then there's one thing he does, I don't know how many times, maybe once per season, where he'll be talking to a character and he'll say something to them that catches them off guard, or something they maybe don't want to hear or don't want to admit to. And like a lot of us will try to play dumb, they'll be like, what? And I love the way Jonathan Rumi will just look right at him and say, you heard me. The first time he did that, I was like, yeah, that would be how it is. You can't pull one off on Jesus.
Right.
You can't be like, oh, what? You heard me. Like, I know that you heard me because I know your thoughts. And just the way it's subtle. But when I hear him, when I see Rumi look at someone in character and just say, you heard me. To me, it's so powerful because it's quiet and it's subtle, but it just reminds you, yeah, you really can't get anything over on Jesus. God knows your thoughts. God knows what you can't pretend you didn't hear what he said to you. So to me, that's may sound like a weird thing to fixate on, but I love those moments where he tells somebody that.
Well, whatever specifically applies to you, there's a reason it hits you particularly one way. And that's the best thing with good art is what sticks out to you isn't what always sticks out to you. But I would also say I do agree with the fact that Jonathan really focuses on the humanity aspect of God, because when you watch a lot of the other depictions of Jesus in shows, you get the fully God portion. It just feels like it's not even attainable. But Jonathan really also
fully man.
He refers to himself as the Son of Man, and it's when you see the humanity that's when you can understand and relate to the fact that he really did die for us, and he did take human form while being fully God.
Right.
And one of the big things they do that I really love is just like you said, the humor aspect he has, because when you're having fun with your friends, you're joking around, you're laughing. That's one of the best examples you can show joy and love to other people is just providing laughter.
And you wonder sometimes how much Jesus may have joked with people or whatever, but I think you heard me say this. The fact that I exist is proof that God has a sense of humor. I wouldn't have the abstract sense of humor I have if God didn't create me this way. Now, I'm not saying God jokes around the same way I do all the time, but The mere fact that I exist and that he created me is evidence that he does have some sense of humor. Mm-hmm. Literally, I don't know how else to put that into words. Now, talking about the Chosen, which I do think is very high level in terms of the quality. Really, there's very few people on that show that I knew of before watching it. Mm-hmm. Eric Avari was on the first season playing Nicodemus. I knew him from some other projects that I had never seen or heard of. Jonathan Rumi, but I think he's great. Is it Shahir Isaac?
Shahar.
Is that it, Shahar Isaac? Mm-hmm. Man, as far as a performance acting standpoint, he's my favorite. The guy that plays Simon Peter, the intensity he brings and the emotion that he brings, and just that guy's really good. There's a moment in, I think it was either season 2 or 3, one of the other disciples was at his house, and they said something that he took a little bit offensive, and he looked down at me and said, when you are in your own home, I guess you could say whatever you want. But here in my house, you need to have some thoughts that you don't speak. And I was like, that was awesome. Because how many of us need to be reminded of, essentially, keep your mouth closed in certain situations. I don't even remember which one of the other guys
it was probably Nathaniel, played by Austin.
It might have been Nathaniel.
So.
But just the way Shahir delivered that line, I was like, that was pretty awesome. And then the scene of him walking on water, which was the end of season 3. That's one of my favorite stories ever in life. So to see that on the screen and the way he and Jonathan played that scene, thus far is my favorite moment on the show. And actually, one of the girls, the one that played Rayma, that was engaged to Thomas, Yasmin Al-Bastami is her real name. We're friends. I haven't seen her in a long time, but we used to be in an acting workshop together.
Really?
In Dallas several years ago. Yeah. Really nice young lady. Always loved working with her. Hadn't seen her in years. And then I'm watching The Chosen, and there I'm like, oh. Before I even saw her name, I was like, that's Yasmin. Yeah. Hadn't seen her in years, didn't know what she's doing. And then I saw her on The Chosen. So that was kind of cool to see her on there, just remembering working with her a lot in class, and then seeing her on this show that I've become a
Would you
fan
could say
of.
you felt something different about her versus other actors you saw in that time period?
Yeah, because I paid a lot more attention to her because I know Yasmin as a person, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm saying even when you were doing the acting classes, like how was she compared to some of the other...
Sorry, I misunderstood the question. The class I was in, there were a lot of talented people, to be honest. But Yasmin, yes, I always knew, I always loved working with her in class. I always, I saw something in her, enjoyed watching her, and we would do scenes together. I even helped her prepare for a couple of auditions. I would just come to class early and run lines with her and stuff. So, yeah, she was someone that I always liked, and I definitely did see, I wasn't shocked to see when she was on, that she had started to get some success, if that answers the question. Now, talking about The Chosen, which I would say pretty high level, but like you said, I think you said your dad at first was like, most Christian stuff's not even that good.
Right. I would say the same thing as well. So.
Well, and that's kind of where I was going.
I am my dad's son, after all.
And I'm not your dad's son, but I am my dad's son.
You know what?
How about that? But what would you say? Actually, I have 2 questions. Do you have a favorite Christian-themed film? And then kind of what are your overall thoughts on the Christian film industry, if you want to call it? It's not really a separate industry. Sure. It's still the film industry, but Christian-themed films in general.
I would say Christian theme. I think that can really be, you can make that as a broad question or a small question. It depends if you're going with implicitly or explicitly Christian.
Okay. Let's say explicitly Christian.
Because, I would, argue you could say something like Lord of the Rings or Chronicles of Narnia or something like that as a Christian movie, even if they don't say. But if you want to go specifically to a Christian film, I would say if I'm looking at modern examples, you don't include It's a Wonderful Life specifically, but I would probably put that one in that work because it is, even if they don't, he does pray to an angel and everything like that. So you could make a case.
There are elements of of that, yes.
So I would argue more Hacksaw Ridge would probably be just one of my go-tos, because it's a man that he has his own religious convictions, and you can believe what you can believe. I'm going to help in this war, but my religious conviction is I can't carry a gun, but I have no problem with that. And just the work he goes through with, he doesn't carry a gun, but he's in World War II. He's going through the trenches, and he's saving people on both sides of the war. Like, that's something that really just impacted me, was just seeing that example. Also, faith at a high level, because the year Hacksaw Ridge came out, it was nominated for Best Picture. So,
yes, it was.
So many movies, I feel like, you put yourself in the box of a Christian movie, when I think really the problem is you want to make the best movie you can be, but if you are a Christian, everything you're going to do is going to reflect that. Like, I think J.R.R. Tolkien said it best when he was writing Lord of the Rings, which is just one I always go back to because that personally resonates with me. But he said when he wrote Lord of the Rings, it was implicitly Christian in the first draft and explicitly Christian in drafts after that. Because the fact that you are a Christian and that's the faith and the paradigm of your life, everything you're going to be doing is going to be reflecting that.
That should resonate from us, right?
And if if you have another religious belief or something like that, or another system you're thinking of, that's going to show in your work too, because you can't be 100% unbiased of what you're going to do, and everything you do is going to be a reflection of the work you do. So I would say Hacksaw Ridge is just an example of filmmaking done at the highest level. Like, you're not going to find a bigger budget, like, a more well-done movie than Hacksaw Ridge, but it's still, at the core of it, it's a Christian movie, but also it's the type of movie that non-Christians will watch as well, because it's not a movie that preaches to the choir. The choir doesn't need to be preached to. They're in the building. What we need to do as Christians is go to the people that are outside of the church.
Right.
So that would be my one that I would say for explicitly. And the second one I would say is a movie called A Man for All Seasons. Have you seen that one?
I have not.
It won Best Picture in, I believe, 1970. Orson Welles has a small little role in it.
Okay.
But it's about, I believe it's Sir Thomas More. It was based on a play, and it was just a really good movie about a man that he has these really strong religious convictions that Henry VIII divorces his wife and marries someone else, and then he pretty much wants Thomas More to either say, like, you're for or against this marriage, and he has the religious conviction and was like, well, it's not right, so I can't say that, or, it's not right that you married and divorced your wife and married this person, so I won't give you my blessing, but also the Bible says that I should still respect my leaders, so I won't say either one of them. So he lives on this really narrow viewpoint that he lives with, and he pays a heavy price for his own personal convictions. And there's a part where some lawyer or somebody else comes up to him, one of the lords of the kingdom, and he says, like, why don't you just say it even if you don't believe it? And he's like, it doesn't bother my conscience at all. And he's like, well, you can go to heaven for following your conscience, and I'll go to hell for not following mine. And it's just, it shows just a good example of, like, really living your life with your convictions to its fullest extent. And it was a movie that really struck me, and after I watched it, it just inspired me. There's like a few other things that I just kind of thought of and had contemplated, but hadn't really put words or thoughts into, and it just really inspired me to go back into the text and be like, specifically for me, like, how do I feel about this? Because seeing this person suffer all this stuff just because he won't say yes or no to like a question or something like that, and just how
he could just easily weasel his way out of it.
Right, and that's another one, like that won Best Picture the year it came out. So it is a Christian movie. He explicitly mentions that he's a Christian. He does all this stuff because of his belief system, but also it's a really great drama. It's based on a play, phenomenal performances, strong characters. So when it came out, it won Best Picture because it's a great movie.
Because the qualities were there.
Right. Or you could go back even further that to Ben-Hur in 1956 with Charlton Heston. Like, that's the first movie to win 11 Oscars. It would only be followed afterwards with Titanic, and Return of the King. So that was another one where it came out in the time period, but it wasn't trying to be a Christian movie. It was trying to be a movie that was Christian because it was going for the highest form of storytelling it could be.
Right.
Because it's not trying to preach to you, it's trying to tell a good story, but because of the authors of that story, it does work that way. It's not trying to preach to you, so it actually is more powerful than the ones that are explicitly preaching to you because people's guards are down because they're watching entertainment.
So would you say, it sounds like you prefer ones that are more implicitly Christian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
go ahead.
because I would say it's the same thing for art. Like, when you watch a movie and you can tell the author has a clear intent what you want to go to, and that can be whether that's a Christian movie or if you're watching a movie and, like I would say if you're watching that, you might be more woke or something like that. Where like, if you can tell there's a clear ideology in either way, you're not telling us a story, you're telling us your ideology. So I don't care which ideology you fall for, you're not telling me a good story. If you tell me a good story and your ideology is in there, that's one thing. But if the goal is the message and not the story.
If the whole thing is just ideology, okay. So would you say, are there any, like, more explicitly, not that I think, like, I'm not looking for a certain answer, I'm just kind of curious, like, more explicitly Christian films, do you enjoy some of those to different extents, or do you not really enjoy if they're, like, too explicitly Christian?
I mean, for me, ultimately, if it's a good movie, it's a good movie. I'm not going to turn off anything either way, but there's some movies you'll watch where you can tell my specific ideology is to do this. And that doesn't matter which side of the spectrum it is. If it's one side, if it's trying to tell the story over or anything comes in front of story, then I don't care about it. Okay. Now, if it's a Christian film that's told well, then that's my favorite type of movie, if you can do that right. And I would say something like the Kendrick brothers is a perfect example of that, with like, I Still Believe and I Can Only Imagine, an American Underdog, where they're telling really good stories.
Those are the Irwin brothers.
Oh, the Irwin brothers, my bad.
Yeah.
Irwin brothers.
Irwin brothers, and there's the Kendrick brothers, yes.
So, I mean, I would say, like, no offense to the Kendrick brothers, but nobody that's a Christian is really not, or if you're not a Christian, you're not really going to watch the Kendrick brothers' work, because it is specifically made to, like, we're making a message or we're telling a movie that is a message, and this is just, we're personifying. It's good stuff, I'll watch them, but the Irwin brothers, like, I can show my non-Christian friends American Underdog or I Still Believe or I Can Only Imagine, and they're going to probably enjoy it because it has story first, and then, like, you can't tell the story of I Can Only Imagine without the faith element.
I was about to say, you can't tell that story without.
And there's a few movies where they try to tell someone's life without the faith element to them, and I feel like it can suffer. Is like, I remember, like, if you've watched Walk the Line with Joaquin Phoenix.
Yes.
I think it's a good movie, but I really feel like the third act doesn't work for me as well, because he has this dramatic change in his life where he repents and everything, and he does everything, and you're like, it doesn't feel right in the movie, but then if you do your research, you learn that, like, the reason he turned his life around was because he followed Christ.
Right, but they leave that aspect out.
And for me personally, like, when I first watched it without knowing as much of Johnny Cash's life, I'm like, I feel like something's missing here. We missed a beat. And then it's like, oh, that's the beat that was missing.
Yeah, no, that is actually a good point. For me, it's interesting because I think one perception people have, a lot of Christian movies are, some people just can't take them serious. Now, I will say I've seen some very good, Christian-themed movies. I've seen some where the quality just wasn't very good. Now, we talked earlier about you got a story to tell it, and I still concur with that. I've seen some Christian movies where I'm like, I guess they were doing the best that they could, and I'll appreciate elements of it, but I can see why some people are like, oh, well, that's one of those Christian movies. What I like to see are movies that, like you said, like with I Can Only Imagine, that they're so good you can't deny. Like, there's a strong Christian element to it.
Right.
But it was done. I want to make, for me and for anybody who does this, I want to make Christian movies where you don't have to put an asterisk that says, this was good for a Christian movie.
Right.
Rather than, oh, this was a really good movie. It happens to have a strong Christian theme, but it was just a really good movie. That's what I look for the most. I do like a lot of the Kendrick Brothers stuff because I like the heart. I agree they're more geared towards the church, but also the church needs to be preached to.
Right.
That's why we have church every Sunday. Right. I'm going to church tomorrow
morning. We're all sinners.
That's why we need to be preached to as well. And I like the emotional core at their movies.
Right. It's still good movies. I didn't mean to knock it.
Oh, no, and I wasn't implying that he didn't like them either. I was just kind of expounding on, I can appreciate Hacksaw Ridge I also really liked. So I like varying styles. One thing, and I'm not going to name specific movies necessarily probably, but what I don't like, and I've seen some of, are movies that maybe have a little bit of a Christian element and maybe like present themselves as Christian, but then when you really watch them, they have a lot of stuff that contradict that. I'll be honest,
contradict the word
that bothers me.
Yeah.
I'm like, why are you even pretending that it's a Christian movie if you're also going to have multiple instances of profanity?
Mm-hmm.
If you're also going to maybe call it a Christian movie and mention God once or twice, then the whole rest of the story goes a completely different direction. Yeah, you got to have other story elements to push the story along. Every single scene doesn't need to be a guy preaching and thumping his Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But if you call it a Christian movie
mm-hmm.
and there's one or two moments of it and the whole rest of the movie has nothing to do with it, to me, that's not a Christian movie. And I'll give you an example just off the top of my head. The reason that the 1984 feature film, The Karate Kid, is entitled The Karate Kid is just because it's about a kid learning karate.
Mm-hmm.
The title of The Karate Kid does not work if it's about ping pong. So if you're going to say that a movie's a martial arts movie, what does it need? It needs a strong element of martial arts. Otherwise, it's another movie with just one fight scene.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, if I hear a movie's like marketed as a Christian film, or I've even served on the jury for a few years for a Christian film festival, and I'll review a lot of movies, and some of them I'm like, why was this movie even in this festival? I might have kind of liked it. There's almost no Christian content.
Mm-hmm.
So, and some of you may disagree with me, and that's okay. But for me, if we're going to call a movie a Christian movie, there's got to be an obvious
There's a list of parameters.
Yeah, there's got to be a strong amount of Christian content. Again, does every scene have to have a sermon? No. But why call it a Christian movie if it's really not one? It's kind of where I'm going with that. So that's one of the elements I look for in a good Christian film. Is it actually a Christian film?
Right.
If it's not, I might still like it. There's other movies I can like and appreciate. But if we're going to call something, let's call something what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort
call
of
a spade a spade.
There, yeah, let's call a spade a spade. I could say that a horse has 5 legs. I can try to tell you that the tail's a leg. At the end of the day, that tail's a tail, and it's still got 4 legs. So yeah, that's. Sometimes I just come up with random analogies, but.
Yeah, that's an original one. If you use it, feel free to credit the Jared Johnson.
Make sure you put you quote it. Just put it in quotations and put Jared Johnson at the end, and then along.
Jared Johnson analogy.
Jared Johnson analogy, one of many. Now, if you were to adopt a basset hound today, would you name it Barrabas?
I mean, it's not a bad name. It's honestly, now that you've said it, I'm not against the idea.
I didn't think you would be.
I have a golden retriever named Sammy, but
okay.
But a basset hound named Barrabas. I mean, I'm not opposed to it. That's a good.
Might be a great addition, Sam. It might become Sammy's new best friend.
Well, if you've ever met a golden retriever, they have love for humans, and that's like all they want to do. And they're all a clone of one dog, and it's the perfect dog. But you see other golden retrievers, they're all the exact same.
But you don't think he would be friends with the basset hound?
I think he could accept
Learn
it.
To tolerate
I think he prefers being the only dog in the house.
So big dog in house, only dog in house.
Yeah, he's a house dog, and if he's not getting scraps at the table, or he's not getting pet constantly or his daily walks, he's spoiled rotten. I think he wants to live with having as much love as possible.
Gotcha.
If we ever have to like dog sit somebody else's dog for like a week or something like that, he almost looks expressed like, oh, now I've got to share. And then as soon as that dog goes,
what do y'all think y'all are doing? I didn't give you permission.
Well, he's just like, wait, it's like, are we testing me right now?
Right.
And then as soon as the other dog goes back, he's like top behavior for
life is
he's
back
like,
to the way
he's like, you guys should never need to think about another dog again.
Did you learn what you needed to learn? Because I'm still here.
Right.
Okay, so Sammy. Okay, but the basset hound named Barrabas, that could work.
It's a possibility.
It seems like it's at least somewhat feasible.
It's not a hard no. I'm open to the possibility. I won't commit myself to a yes.
But you're not necessarily going to purchase the basset hound today.
Right. Yeah.
Necessarily.
I wouldn't necessarily purchase. Now, if you had a basset hound for me being on the podcast, or like if you get
here's your
look under the table, Barabbas.
Where's that crate? Yeah.
Chris, can we get Barabbas in here?
He's just gonna come. He's gonna bring him around the corner.
He's just going to the bathroom right now.
I mean, Barabbas has been high. He's very well behaved. You didn't even hear him this whole time, did you?
No, I didn't.
No, see?
Yes,
the type
I'm
of
sold.
basset hound you want. One that's not going to ruin your day.
I'm sold.
Okay. See, all we had to do was kind of flesh that out a little bit to come to the conclusion. And on that note, are you aware that right now, in this very moment, things are more like they are than they ever have been?
Sure.
It's good that you agree. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and land the plane on that note. Christian Kraemer, thank you so much for stopping by.
It was my pleasure, sir. Thanks for letting me.
Indubitably a genuine pleasure. I hope you all enjoyed the episode as much as we clearly did. If you did like the episode, please show that by clicking the like button. If you've not already done so, please subscribe to the channel. It really will help enable me to continue to bring you this types of content, as well as many other types of content. So, for Christian Kraemer, for Basset Hound's name, Barrabas everywhere, I am Jared Johnson, the Jared J. Thank y'all for stopping by. Hope you have a great week, and I hope I see you again real soon.
And if you do want to follow me or any of my other film adventures or anything like that on social media, look me up at probably Christian Kraemer on Instagram or anywhere you're getting stuff. It's just Christian Kraemer.
Probably Christian Kraemer.
Probably Christian Kraemer.
Yeah, now Barrabas might approve of that.